I don't know what it is about the name McGee in this World Cup, but I mean, two of the top try scorers, Francesca's on 6 and Braxton Sorensen is on 6. Both McGees, both like absurd rates. Both have got at least one hat trick.
Yeah.
We're at a ridiculous rate at the minute.
Yeah, and Francesca, of course, has scored a try in every game she's played in. Obviously, Braxton Sorensen McGee didn't score in the opener against Japan, but had a pretty good game. But was a bit quieter. And then I think the more and more this tournament's gone on, the more and more the Black Ferns have gone, oh, she's just a weapon which you need to give the ball to at all costs.
And the more and more the Black Ferns have grown. It's something we've heard repeatedly. A lot of the Kiwi pundits say the Black Ferns are always a team that grows into tournaments, right? Yeah. And we may not see the best in the first 2 games, but then once we hit the final pool game, from there on out, it'll really grow. And I think that could not have been more spelt on. Yeah. I think the Black Ferns this weekend put in the best performance of the tournament by any team, probably by a head.
Yeah. So flashback to what our prediction for this game was.
Yeah.
We kind of said that, to summarise it in a basic manner, simplify it, we kind of thought Ireland would go in so like overly fired up that they would almost burn out kind of thing. The Black Ferns would then just show what they were made of, and I don't know, it would be one of those where the Black Ferns play like the Black Ferns. I didn't think it would go like this.
So I said before the tournament, I thought the Black Ferns would win by a margin.
Yeah.
So we'd be looking at like quite a big win here. Like it would be their big statement game. Before the tournament, I remember thinking 18 was the margin I predict. The day of, I was thinking like, I think about more. I think about like pushing 30.
Yeah.
I thought it would be like 36-12 or something. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, I thought we were looking at like comprehensive win.
First half fight, Black Ferns blow them away. Second half kind of thing.
Yeah. 14-0. Now, the most important bit isn't the 40 points, right? The Black Ferns scoring 40 points, very much in the ballpark, I think, what we were expecting.
Sure.
The nil.
Yeah.
That is the interesting bit. That is the really telling bit. That is the thing that, like, the Black Ferns have always scored tries, right? And you look at when they've won World Cups, it's always been they've dragged teams into playing their way, right? And you look at the last World Cup final, England plays such brilliant, tight rugby. They have the red card early on, the game becomes so much more open. Yeah. And suddenly, the Black Ferns are in total control because they're a team that score points, right? And the defence hasn't always been the thing they're prided on. Always a good defensive team. Obviously, they've won, 6 World Cups. But at the same time, we are not looking at a team who traditionally, historically, we think of as a defensive unit. And yet, this day, they were exceptional. Yeah. Ireland are, the number 5 team in the world, and the Black Ferns are number 3. That is not a massive margin between the two teams, and yet they were just so completely in control of the game in either 22.
Yeah. You look at, again, talking about Ireland being like the overly fired up thing, right? The first thing to talk about this game is the thing that happened before the game even started, which was the haka standoff. That Ireland, and I love this. I love when this happens in big games, when teams pick the right moment to go, no, we're going to challenge you. And after the game, like whenever any of the Ireland players were asked about it, they said, we did it as a mark of respect because we really respect the haka. We really respect the Black Ferns. And it was obviously a great moment. It's always a really good moment of drama when you see those two teams like facing up against each other. But then you get that performance from the Black Ferns and it completely like silences. It's always the risk with a haka challenge, isn't it? Is that you're always going to look silly if you lose the game. Yeah. And the thing is, it's usually done against the New Zealand National Rugby Union team, who are classically pretty good. There is always the risk that it's going to backfire.
You think about Wales forcing them to do it in the changing room and that really, really pissing them off and causing New Zealand to just come out fuming and destroy them by 50 points.
The 80s Wallabies warming up during it, losing 66-0.
Yeah. And there's, and then the one that always stands out is Wales doing exactly the same standoff in 2008. Yeah. And on that day, that's the closest Wales come to beating the All Blacks in, I think, like 30-odd years. Yeah. So certainly they haven't come close since. It was a 7-point margin in the end. And Alan Wynne-Jones made an intercept. If he could have got the pass away to Tom Shanklin, perhaps they draw the game. Who knows? But Dan Carter should have had a yellow card as well in that game. But that's all by the by. I don't think about it. Not that regularly anyway. But this Black Ferns performance, right, set the tone from the off. Ireland got the ball pretty much immediately inside the first minute and had an attacking chance in the half and then in the 22 by minute 3. And on both occasions, the Black Ferns were incredibly aggressive. You look at like Georgia Miller flying out of line here or when they get into the 22, right? I love the way defensively they use Ruhe Demant.
Yeah.
So Demant, obviously good tackler, but not like a fearful, gonna smash everyone. Like good technical tackle, good, she's a fly half, right?
Yeah.
But the way they used her to just spook Ireland, so like her flying, like absolutely herring out of line and just getting in the eye line, right? And then you've got a few chances like you get into the second half to fast forward a bit. And like, again, here, they just get her flying up, the pass doesn't go to hand, and suddenly she's in the face and can then make the tackle some like 10, 15 metres behind the gain line, all from just like getting her to fly out. So going like everyone else will cover it, right? Sylvia Brunt had an exceptional game, and that back row are so dynamic, no matter which of them it is, they can cover a lot of ground, and therefore using her in that kind of traditional 13 or 7s role, or like Eben Netzbeth does it so well for the Springbok men, of just like absolutely flying up out of line and trying to get in the island, disrupt the pass, or cause the ball catcher, like as they take the ball, to kind of go, okay, my options have closed off much more than they actually have because she's so close to you. And they use her incredibly smartly, like someone who will make a tackle. They're not a dominant tackler, but they will get you to ground. And by flying out and using them as the kind of core piece, allowed them to put so much more pressure on Ireland.
Yeah. So quick shout out to Sam, by the way, who runs the Women's Rugby Show on Instagram and all sorts of social media. Really great channel, interviewing players and just like covering every Women's Rugby game there is. Not just a World Cup thing, covers every single Women's Rugby game that ever has. I don't know how Sam does it, but he's brilliant at what he does. But he did an interview with Aoife Dalton after the game, and he asked her, like, right, if you had to boil it down to one thing, what was the difference between today's game and the game less than 12 months ago where you beat the Black Ferns? What was the one difference if you had to boil it down to that? And Aoife Dalton said line speed for both teams was completely different. That Ireland play maybe the most aggressive blitz defence in this tournament.
Yeah.
And the Black Ferns were a bit more passive in that previous game, and in this game they were utterly relentless on both sides of the ball. And looking at how the Black Ferns mitigated what Ireland do, because it's how they get into teams' heads, is that they force them to drop the ball, because they've got a great kicking game, and from that they will force errors by bringing line speed. And instead, this week, you look at this opportunity here, for instance, where they go to one side, and then immediately Real High Demand knows, I don't want to attack this way. I want to challenge them on the blind side, and then slings it back to the right-hand side where Amy Duplessis has reloaded nice and quickly, like as soon as the ball's played from Pory Lane. And once again, they use Georgia Miller in that third centre role, and she's reloaded, makes the break, offload to Sorensen McGee on the blind side. Ireland don't know how to react to this because they're suddenly second-guessing all the time. And we speculated on this after the New Zealand-Japan game. How often will they use blind sides? Again, for future teams, that is such a thorn in your side, isn't it? That you're constantly wondering, like, which side are they going to try and attack? And as well as that, they have the wide attack, which they play at such speed that it becomes so difficult to defend.
Yeah.
You look at this occasion here in the lead up to Sorensen McGee's first try, where off turnover ball, they use Georgia Miller in the boot here as a fly half, and she ships it wide. They get it out to Woodman Whitcliffe, who obviously takes two women to bring her down, like 9 times out of 10. So Aoife Dalton is on the floor here, one of the centres, one of the key decision makers in the 13 channel. They go one phase in field. They have Renee Holmes organising one side, they have Real High Demand organising the other one, and instead of going straight out the boot to Waka here, they very cleverly try and just isolate Dana O'Brien, who's defending sort of on the wing with a couple of the players out the game in the back line here. Eve Higgins is one woman inside her, and so very cleverly, Layla Sai runs an extremely straight line to just take her out of the game. So Higgins is on the floor. O'Brien basically just has a foot race against Stacey Waka to get to that edge. Waka wins that every day of the week. Manages to draw in Costigan, frees Sorensen McGee down the wing. 1v1, she finishes that every time. And it's an absolutely lethal step off her right-hand side from Sorensen McGee, who finishes it. It's world class by the Black Ferns. They have so many ball players, so many just crucial decision makers in this team. And I think the thing that kind of got me the most out of this is how many tries you look at and go, oh, I think they've improvised there. I think they don't have a set move that they've ran there. I think they've just said, right, you're going to run a short line here, then you're going to lift it out the back to Maya Joseph, who's going to dummy and chuck it to the edge. You know, I think that there's so many occasions like that where they just have so much rugby intellect in this team, both as an attack and a defensive force.
Yeah. And you mentioned that coming off turnover ball, right, which is the really impressive thing. And that's become such a huge part of their attack that I really like about their defence, that they are, to go back to it a bit, that they are so contained that, you know, obviously Ireland thinking about the line speed, right? But if you actually look at the performance, obviously they are getting off the line, but they're not like a Springbok men. They're not like, you know, like historic Sean Edwards teams. where they are just incredibly aggressive and getting up in your face all the time. It's really selective.
Yeah.
And I thought this was really smart, that they are conserving their energy an awful lot, that they're not just like flying up nilly-willy. They are having 1 or 2 players shoot out a line, and the rest being like, we'll come up 5 meters rather than a full 10 to get in your face.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a really smart way of breaking down, this particular Irish system. But also, when we look beyond that, a lot of the other teams in this tournament play a reasonably similar approach, right? Because the meta in women's rugby is to keep hold of the ball for long periods, right? So you don't want to be flying up, because it works in men's rugby much more, because you are looking at teams who play shorter, sharper bursts. So if you can knock someone back 5 meters, 5 meters, 5 meters on successive phases, right, they will probably kick the ball away.
Yeah.
In women's rugby, that is much less likely to happen. So you then go, right, okay, we've put everything into 3 phases. We have emptied the tank for this set of phases. We're going to need a breather in a minute. And yet, we've made 50 metres, they're going to keep attacking, they're going to make those 50 metres back inside maybe 5 phases rather than the 3 it took us to knock them back. It becomes much less sustainable over 80 minutes. The Black Ferns are not doing that. They're applying their line speed through being incredibly smart in the way they use it. They're picking individual phases and individual players to fly up and do it. Georgia Miller and Rua Demant being kind of the main ones.
Yeah.
We're also seeing the 2 centres flying up. And like individual props and locks and so on are all doing it, but they're picking it on a moment-by-moment basis and actually being quite like a softer blitz for most of the time, which is really smart as a way of containing the way that most teams attack in the women's game, including Ireland. And Ireland obviously play a more kick-heavy game outside of the opposition 22 than most teams. And yet, right, you then, by doing that, by being more selective and by having that in place where you can go, okay, if they're going to attack, then we are going to be really aggressive on them. If they're not, then we're going to sit off a bit. I just think it's like a really, really smart way of containing, particularly this Ireland team. But then also, the majority of teams they'll face, right? Like the only team I think could be a problem in this area is Canada.
Yeah, because of that positionless nature of how they play, isn't it?
And we'll get into that down the line. Like we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves there. But
also on that, like, it's not limited to just Georgia Miller and Rua Demant.
No.
You look at like Sylvia Brunt is outstanding at this. You imagine that when Michaela Tui comes back into the fold, that's like custom made for her. Somebody who can bounce around, fly off the line, make scrag tackles and like make key decisions, because she plays simultaneously like a second row and a centre. So she just averages out as a number 8, kind of somewhere in the middle. They've got so many players like that who are kind of custom built for that kind of defence, where it's so adaptable and, as I say, like kind of improvisable, if that's a word in this context. But the other thing around this is Ireland typically, against most teams, get around this using Dana O'Brien, one of the best kickers in the women's game, to get downfield, right? To use that as the cheat code. And New Zealand completely nullified this. And I think one of the gradual talking points of this World Cup has been the complete sheer selectability of Renee Holmes at fullback.
Yes.
Not selected in Pack 4 earlier in the year, didn't make the squad for that, was viewed as out of form, and she has risen up so rapidly to become one of the form players in this World Cup. So Renee Holmes, for anybody unaware, at fullback is renowned as, I kind of forgot to mention her when I was suggesting Emma Singh and Morgan Bourgeois as the 2 best goal kickers in women's rugby. Renee Holmes 100% is part of that.
She's part of that golden trio, isn't she?
Yeah. All fullbacks, funnily enough, rather than fly halves. But all of those world-class kickers that, you see Renee Holmes slot them from the touchline at all times. And she's so solid, such a brilliant decision maker at the back, defensively so good. And one of the key things about her is she's a very rare rugby athlete in that she's a genuinely ambidextrous kicker. Yeah. She kicks better off her left foot. And I have this superpower where I know what footedness every rugby player is, right? I actually thought Renee Holmes was left-footed before this tournament. And now I've realised she's actually right-footed, because that just speaks volumes of how good she is a kicker off either foot. But there's certainly not another kicker like that in women's rugby.
It's just Dupont.
Yeah, I think Antoine
Johnny
Dupont
Wilkinson
is the only current international men's player that I can think of who is of that level.
Only because Lloyd Williams isn't playing international.
Indeed. But yeah, Johnny Wilkinson you mentioned is kind of the historic one.
Yeah.
But in women's international rugby, I can't think of another player who is like that. Yeah. And so it means that there is no situation that the Black Ferns can be in at the back that she can't get them out of.
I figure this won't come up when we talk about the wider context, right? But it's the one thing about this Red Roses team is they're incredibly right-footed. They have one player that's left-footed?
I can't think of any.
Okay, no, so their entire backline is
Yeah.
right-footed. But that is a huge potential option to have there, is have just like the ability to bounce around there and to target that a bit more.
Yeah.
But that's, again, for another time. We're here to talk about one game and one game only. I want to pick on the Black Ferns attack a bit again, right? So they entered the 22 3 times without scoring, which is a pretty impressive rate. You know, it's not bad, especially when you're scoring the number of tries and you're getting a decent number of 22 entries. There is... Then, like, obviously, we can look at things like the Joseph try, which is absurd, right? And just like brilliant attacking rugby, and things like the Waka try, which we'll get into more, video a few days later on the main channel. But those are brilliant attacking, classic Kiwi rugby, give and pass, handling, looking for space opportunities, right? But things like the Veliko try is really smartly taken, because that's very different. That's very much not the case. It's just like, it's not even detail in the way we've talked about in past with some of the other teams, like the Red Roses, and we talked about Springbok Men the other day. It is very much just like vision. Yeah. It's pure like rugby sight. So they forward. It's a really nice move. It's a really sharp move to just kind of get like over the gain line, off that line out, just get themselves going, and it draws in the Ireland pack. And the Ireland pack don't work that hard to get round, and it allows Veliko, as the first player in, to just run straight at Higgins. Like, Higgins is the second defender out, right? And so you can position a prop there, and critically, she doesn't go low to drive for the line. She runs upright, knowing that's her best chance of riding a tackle, of making 1 extra yard, and then dips. And there is a risk of getting held up over the line here, right? If Ireland have more numbers around her, if there's 3 players here rather than 2, potentially she gets held up. She doesn't, there isn't, so it ends up as a try. It's just a case of them looking up and going, okay, situationally, what are we doing, right? And obviously we don't have a version of the tape where there are 3 players there and to know whether or not she goes lower or whatever. But from the fact that they weren't getting held up over the line, you can kind of figure that like actually these players are being coached well to know body position, to know who to run at and how to get that ball down over the line once they get within 5 metres.
It's calculated risk, isn't it? It's knowing I'm a bigger ball carrier against a smaller ball carrier or smaller tackler, I suppose. And like Eve Higgins is strong.
But massively.
Like Chris Veliko is an extremely powerful ball carrier. And that is like her USP in this team.
And physically much bigger than Higgins, right? So can ride that for 1
Land
metre,
on top.
which is the only metre she needs.
100%. And again, looking at the Black Ferns attack, you mentioned the Maya Joseph try at the end there. I just want to quickly look upon that, because that was a turning point almost of this World Cup, that they'd had Sorensen McGee's 3rd try, came at about 78 minutes. They kick off once more, and at this point, Ireland looks so deflated that they will have gone into, woken up on that day thinking we're going to win this game. We're going to have a historic day where we qualify as top seeds, beating the Black Ferns. And instead, they're at this point where they're so demoralised. And getting this last try just felt like such a warning sign to England, to Canada, to France, to anybody who's looking at potentially going for that final spot. Looking at this once again, they carry 1 phase in field and they set up a pod of 3 forwards off Rohai Demant here. And they are looking to target Brittany Hogan as the outside woman in the Irish defensive line, the last forward out. Hogan's an extremely smart defender, and she has spotted Setefano coming out the back and has gone, right, I'm going to see if I can double job, get out the back here. And instead, the Black Ferns, again, improvise their attack completely on the fly. And Rohai Demant skips across to Laura Bayfield as the furthest woman out here. And Bayfield, an extremely good ball player, runs a hard line. And what I love about this is how they adapt around this. So in the boot, they have both Teresa Setefano and Aisha Letty Iinga, both hidden in behind. As I say, I think Hogan spotted Setefano, but from outside of her field of view, Stacey Waka comes flying in as the tip-on line for Laura Bayfield here, which means suddenly she's got a hit and a boot to worry about. She can't deal with this all on her own because she's marking a different woman to what she thought she was a minute ago, who's 5 metres further away. And so Setefano slides properly into the boot of Bayfield, and the whole Black Ferns backfield shifts out 1. Letty Iinga comes from a hidden position and times that run onto the right-hand shoulder of Setefano beautifully to just lift it at the last second as they're worried about the stretched back line on the outside, and instead they go for the simple ball through the middle, and Letty Iinga makes the break, times the pass perfectly to Sorensen McGee, rides the tackle, offloads to Georgia Miller. Georgia Miller's a freak, we know this. Gets away an impossible-looking offload. It's like one of those that happens on Rugby Challenge when you hold down
the whole thing stinks of Rugby Challenge.
Yeah, the left pass button.
Yeah.
And then somehow it like laser targets into Maya
Joseph's
Joseph's
hangs in the air, then
hands.
someone teleports and appears on the ball.
Yeah, and that's pretty much exactly what happens here. We know that Georgia Miller's a cheat code, but this is something else, what she throws here. And Maya Joseph goes the whole way. But honestly, the pitch could have been like 90 metres longer, and I'm confident they'd have scored this on first phase.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous, like how many offloads they have in their arsenal, how many offloaders, and as I say, just like the improvised nature of their rugby, married up with a world-beating structure. Honestly, like, we have so much to see of this Black Ferns.
There's something that stands out to me in their communication, clearly.
Yeah.
Right? That clearly they're able to give this call of, I'm going to wrap around and come at your boot last second, just hang it in the air for me, don't try and pass to me, don't fling anything longer, just hang it in the air and I'll run onto it and I'll find the space on your left. They communicate that clearly in one word, right? They've clearly got like one word meaning every set of circumstances, and every player knows and critically trusts the players around them. And it becomes this really complete unit. Like the synergy and the kind of cohesion and the chemistry of this team is unbelievable. And it's clearly a lot of it coming through just like having calls, being drilled on what they're doing, on knowing like, okay, this is a line you can run, this is a line I might pick, so we've got one word I can call so I can do it on the fly. I don't need to waste any time saying, Teresa, why don't you pop it up on your left? I will hit that ball in a split second. It's just like, no, like, they know the timing, they trust each other.
It's the Stacey Waka line that's the kind of the interesting bit of that, because that is such an unselfish line for a centre to run. Is because she knows she's not getting the ball there, but she makes so much room for a whole back line around her. It's world class.
Honestly, quite astonishing performance from the Black Ferns.
Yeah, it was.
I think there's been a lot of talk from an Irish point of view, which we haven't really.
Yeah, but I think that sums up the game.
Yeah.
The fact that the Black Ferns silenced a brilliant Ireland team.
There's been a lot of talk from Irish fans of, I think Tom from Three Road Kings described it as everything that could go wrong went wrong for Ireland. And I think a little bit of that's true, but I think a lot of that was just because the Black Ferns were so good.
The Black Ferns made that true.
I think Ireland broadly, and I feel a bit the same way about Wales playing Scotland early in the tournament, right? Actually, if you break down most of the rugby, they're fine. Right? Ireland got enough 22 entries to not win the game, but to be in the game prior to that last 3 minutes from the Black Ferns where they exploded and won it, right? Like, they created enough chances to be at 21, 26, right? Rather than 26-0. And they just didn't take them. And bits of that is accuracy, bits of that is, just detail around the attack and so on. But an awful lot of that, a bit of that is maybe actually, do they need to create a handful more chances? They kicked the ball less than I was expecting, I think. And maybe they could have looked to use the boot more, maybe put some pressure on, because when they did, they got some real results. But a lot of that was just the Black Ferns defence. And a lot of that was just them flying up and all the things we just talked about in terms of the individualised pressure, in terms of the way they just seem to click, in terms of the communication in defence as well is clearly exceptional. And they just couldn't break them down. And I think more of this is on the Black Ferns than on Ireland, frankly. I don't think Ireland were as bad as being made out. Yeah.
Scott Beamon looked fuming through the game. Like, he looked so deflated, because he's an attack coach at heart, and his team scored 0 points. But
I think there's something interesting about Scott Beamon, right? So before the Canada game in the warm-up, he said that beating Canada this weekend, when we beat Canada this weekend, it will be like the best way to set ourselves up for the World Cup. And then a few days ago, he said that when we beat New Zealand, it'll open us up for the pools to go on and win the tournament, like get a better draw. And look, I get you've got to back your team. I love it. I'd much rather that than if I was a random player than Emily Chandler saying we're going to try and hang out with England and hopefully we keep them within 100 points. Or than the messages we're likely getting from the likes, from a few of the other teams, the kind of the Wales and Scotlands of the world. And no doubt, drastically different from Greg McWilliams previously, and the messages they were getting there. But at the same time, has it got a little bit of going are you bigging your team up too big too early, right?
Yeah, I get that.
They've beaten the Black Ferns once, and that is an enormous achievement, right? That is huge. I don't mean to demean that, but have they got to kind of be more consistent in these results before they start putting so much pressure on the team?
Yeah.
Because I felt were the team unnecessarily stressed by the thought of they gone into this game expecting to beat the Black Ferns, rather than last time? That wasn't the case. And if they'd lost that last game, they would have been gutted, but it wouldn't have been the kind of emotional heartbreak it was here. Because everyone, like pre-tournament, everyone's pointing to this game as the upset.
Yeah, I think there's a part of that is kind of just coach speak, trying to build belief, as you say.
Of course.
But you're right, there is a little bit of managing expectation. On the other side of that, obviously it's the World Cup, and they're here to try and win it, and they still are, having got through to the knockout stages now. And Scott Beeman's obviously worked, previously was in the England setup, who were gunning for the World Cup. So I wonder if he's basically left that job and gone, I'm going to bring that exact mentality to this Irish team, which might be why they've done so well, but it's hard to tell.
It's a really clean link to draw, isn't it? Because there's been awful lot of talk about, are England arrogant? Them talking about, when we're playing in the final, etc. already. So I don't know. There's that question there. I don't think Ireland were that bad.
No.
However, I do think the mental side of this, and a lot of that is the fact they went in expecting to win this game, or at least feeling like they had a very good chance to then lose 40-0. When I think I think if they'd lost, as I say, 21-26, that then goes, okay, no, we can build off that. We can beat anyone if we've got a bit more luck, we've got a bouncy ball going our way, etc. And then we build into that to play France. I think now they go in a bit like, oh, we were expecting to beat the Black Ferns, let's compete with them. We didn't.
Yeah.
Do we take on France in a different light? I don't know.
England men made a World Cup final in 2007, having lost to the Springbok men 36-0 in the group stage.
Yeah.
So you never know. These things do sometimes turn around. I don't necessarily think it will.
Compared to that 2007 England team.
I mean, fair point.
They also critic that Johnny Wilkinson come back in between us two.
That is also true.
But maybe they got Renee Holmes in and someone also ambi-footedness.
Yeah, if Donna O'Brien decides to learn to kick off her right foot in the next week,
then she just goes to live in Newcastle for a bit.
Yeah,
just see if that works for her.
Yeah,
she just arrives at training 6 hours early, stays 6 hours late.
Back to your previous point.
Yeah.
I kind of don't think Ireland could have done much more, which is the sad thing about this. The Black Ferns completely blew them off the park.
Tiny
they lost
bits
to
of
a better
accuracy,
team.
But I kind of think the best version of this game was Ireland. As I say, it was either 26-0 and they held out those last 2 tries, or it's they scored 2 tries at most.
I agree with what Tom Freewood Kings has said, saying that it is kind of the nightmare day. It couldn't have gone any worse. But I think that was largely, and not entirely, but largely just because the Black Ferns were so completely relentless. Yeah. And I've rarely seen a performance like it. Certainly in this World Cup, I've not seen anything like it.
I think it's the best performance in the World Cup.
In the last men's World Cup, it reminded me of the All Blacks putting 90 points on Italy. Yeah. And it was like the defensive equivalent of that, of just defensively, the Black Ferns were perfect. Every time Ireland got into the 22, they just shunted them back and back and back and won a penalty and cleared their lines. Yeah. And it looked like there was a point where I was thinking oh my God, am I looking at the world champions here? Yeah. But that is a discussion we will have another day.
No. Okay, so final question, final point, right?
Yeah.
The percentage game is back.
The percentage game.
Okay, we start this tournament with England at 95%, Black Ferns at 3%, right? What percentage would you put the Black Ferns at now?
Maybe about. I've not really thought about this. About 30.
I've swung massively. I think we've gone from England at 90 plus to England about 50.
Yeah.
And they still have England 50%, Black Ferns 30%, and then we're looking at the others. We'll make Canada 20, Canada 25%, everyone else 5%. Is where I'm currently saying.
Quick maths.